But instead we have a very interesting person to replace him, to say the least. Our dear friend, AMP Executive Board Member and Vice President, attorney, professionally, who practices in Milwaukee, and also hails from a very popular town in this conference, Elbira. He's from Elbira. And we hopefully would welcome our dear brother Munjid Ahmed to the stage to speak about the more legal nuanced aspect of what it means to be resisting occupation from a Palestinian perspective. As it is well known, and something that Dr. Hanan Ashrawi said one time, that the Palestinian people are the only occupied people in the world that are required to guarantee the security of their occupier, which is absolutely absurd when you think about it. And so it's important for us to dissect this issue of resistance in multiple ways, and I hope that we can get a good perspective now. Thank you.
I don't think I've ever been described as interesting. That's okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First, let me just, as Brother Tahir said, I'm here filling in for my dear brother, my leader, my teacher, Uthman Atta, who had very serious eye surgery in Milwaukee. So I ask all of you to please keep him in your dua. Inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give him the quick, speedy recovery, inshallah. So please keep him in your dua. I would appreciate that. So as Miko Peled had indicated, the right of resistance to an occupation, or the right of resistance to your occupier, is thoroughly enshrined in international law. It's something that is not a nuance. I'm sorry to pick on you a little bit, it's not a nuance, it's something that we know about, it's something that's there, it's something that international law and UN resolutions, which we'll get into in a second, clearly indicate. And Palestinians, like any other people, have that right of self-determination to live free from colonial domination, to live free from the humiliation of an occupation. They have the right to resist those who wish to deny them their basic fundamental rights. They have the right to resist those people who try to harm them or kill them. They have the right to resist those people who are trying to ethnically cleanse them, and in fact have already done so in certain respects. They have the right to resist the inhumane sieges. They have the right to resist the collective punishment. They have the right to resist the theft of their lands. They have the right to resist the theft and the divergence of their natural resources. They have the right to resist the political imprisonment, as Miko Peled has talked about. They have the right to resist the torture that happens after that political imprisonment. They have the right to resist the assassination and the assassination attempts. They have the right to resist the daily subjugation to occupation. Yes, they have the right to resist. That right to resist is a universal right. It's a human right. It's one that it's a moral right, frankly. I mean, we talk about these rights to resist under law and all these humanitarian issues. We forget about the morality that's needed, or the morality that causes the right of resistance, the morality that comes to fruition when you're subjugated to this occupation. Yes, it's a moral right. It's a God-given right, because as we know, God has created all people to be free, to be able to determine their own destiny, and to live and worship as they please. So yes, it is a right to resist your occupiers. They have the definite right to resist. They have the legal right of peaceful resistance or the use of arms. And I know that a lot of people are very uncomfortable talking about this, but yes, Palestinians have the right to use arms. They have, and again, when we talk about the use of arms, when we talk about the resistance, there are, of course, international and rules, and we have to live within the scope of those rules as Palestinians, but nonetheless, we still have those rights. Because at the end, they have the right to secure their own freedom. And that's very important to know. So when we look at the question of whether people have the right to resist their occupier, I think you guys all figure out where I stand on this. The answer is absolutely. The short answer is absolutely they have the right to resist. And so the next question, or the follow-up to that is, okay, so where is that found, and how do we respond to those who, as Miko has said, call the people who resist terrorists or call their actions criminal? Okay, so how do we respond to that? Well, again, these are just kind of my opinions, but the fact of resistance is found, first of all, in history. If we look at the history of the world, we'll find resistance. And yesterday, for those of you who were here last night, Dr. Mads Gilbert had mentioned how the Norwegian people who had been occupied various times had fought for their independence against the Germans at the end. And they secured that independence through resistance. And so that's one for the history books. Well, here's another one, the French Revolution. That's a resistance. Here's another one, the American Revolution. Give me liberty or give me death. Patrick Henry. That's a form of resistance. Patrick Henry, when he's talking about death, he's not talking about sitting at home crying about an occupation or crying about not having freedom. He's talking about an armed resistance. And in fact, that speech was given so that Virginia would send troops to fight in the American Revolution. That's resistance. So history gives us a notion of resistance. Besides the history, let's talk about the rights that we find in the United Nations resolutions. And I know that I was asked to talk a lot about the legalese on this, and I'll get into that, but I also realize that people get bored with me when I talk about law, and my wife will be the first to tell you I do bore people quite a bit. So, with that said, I want to start by talking about the Fourth Geneva Convention of 1949 and its subsequent protocols. The specific protocol I want to talk about is Protocol Number 1 from 1977, which is an amendment. That protocol has 102 articles which outline the items that, frankly, Israel violates on a day-to-day basis. So I'll just outline a few of them, and you can apply the Israeli action here, because it'll be very simple to do in just a moment. So first is indiscriminate attacks on civilian populations. Can anybody think of one example? Recent example. Of course, Gaza, right? Number 2, destruction of food, water, and other materials needed for survival. This, by the way, includes the divergence of those natural resources to things such as settlements, which we know happens all the time. Attacks on places of worship. I don't have to tell you how many mosques were destroyed in the last massacre in Gaza. Use of banned weapons that cause superfluous injury or unnecessary suffering, as well as means of warfare that cause widespread, long-term, and severe damage to the natural environment. And we know that they were using that phosphorus gas in Gaza, so that falls in there. Now, what's interesting to note here, and I'm sure a lot of you know this, that protocol also requires special protections for women, children, and civilians, but instead, of course, the government of Israel continues to collectively punish the Palestinians rather than securing their safety. Now, if we talk about United Nations resolutions that are specific to resistance, I'll give you a few, again, trying not to bore you too much here. But in 1978, the UN General Assembly had a resolution which was 33/24, again, 1978, and it actually, quote, reaffirms the legitimacy of the struggle of peoples for independence, territorial integrity, national unity, and liberation from colonial and foreign domination and foreign occupation, here's the highlight, by all available means, particularly armed struggle. Let that sink in for a second. We're talking about the United Nations here, we're talking about resistance, and we're talking about international law, particularly armed struggle. That's directly from the United Nations. So, do we have the right to resist? Of course. Let's go 4 years prior. 4 years prior to 1978. So 1974, General Assembly Resolution 3246. Part 3 reaffirms, and I quote, reaffirms the legitimacy of the people's struggle for liberation from colonial and foreign domination and alien subjugation by all available means, again, including armed struggle. Now, what's interesting about this particular resolution, and I want you to take note of this, is not that particular article or entry. It's the one that comes 4 down, 4 after it. So article number 7, if you're taking notes, which says that it strongly condemns all governments which do not recognize the right to self-determination and independence of peoples under colonial and foreign domination and alien subjugation, notably, the peoples of Africa and the Palestinian people. So interesting here, what we see is this particular resolution talks in article number 3 about the right of armed struggle, and then specifically talks about the Palestinian people. So, do the Palestinian people have a right to resist? Absolutely, absolutely. And again, and I'm not talking about only BDS, I'm not talking about the brothers in Berlin, which I fully support those struggles, I fully support those types of resistance, but I'm also talking about an armed struggle, because that is absolutely what these resolutions are talking about. It specifically says particularly armed struggle. In 1973, the General Assembly passed a resolution specifically referring to the South African resistance as well as the Palestinian people by saying, and I'm just going to give you the end point here so as not to bore you, by all available means, including armed struggle. You guys are getting it, because it's a common theme. It's a common theme. So, now let's talk about those people who wish to deny the Palestinian people of their right to resistance to this oppressive military regime. I only have one word or 2 words for them. They're either the oppressors or the enablers. That's what they are. Because clearly, I mean, I've stated the law already, I've stated the resolutions already, so those people who criminalize the Palestinian struggles are either the oppressors themselves, and people don't admit when they're wrong that often, especially in something like this, or the people that are enabling them, which leads us to our government. Sadly, in the context of this particular struggle, the Israeli-Palestinian struggle, our government, the United States, has never sided with the principles of international law, has never sided with the right of self-determination. In fact, they've done exactly the opposite. They've sided with the most oppressive regime, in my opinion, in the world right now. They've aided, supported, financed, armed, provided diplomatic cover for, and have perpetuated the brutal occupation against the Palestinian people. And it's very unfortunate. I love my country. I was born and raised in this country. But I don't like where we're going, where we have gone, and where we continue to go in making the same mistakes over and over and over again, supporting the wrong regimes. We continue to support this belligerent occupying force and continue to be complicit in the denial of the self-determination of the Palestinian people. Palestine is not the only case where the U.S. government has taken the wrong side. So here I'm going to ask for some help. I'm going to give you a scenario, and you're going to hopefully tell me who I'm talking about. So there's this guy once who lived in a very oppressive regime, under a very oppressive regime. He fought against that regime. His group fought against that regime. He was imprisoned for decades because of his fight against that horrible regime. Then he got out, and he became a hero because everybody understood who he really was. Who? Nelson Mandela, right? Spot on. Of course, our government made a mistake there too. Our government labeled the African National Congress as a terrorist organization. Our government essentially labeled Nelson Mandela as a terrorist. And our government took the side of the Afrikaner regime during this time. So I kind of found it interesting when our President Barack Obama talked about Nelson Mandela when he passed as a hero, because at the time he wasn't considered that. And I argue and I submit to you, there will come a day where the Palestinian people who are struggling every single day, the martyrs of Palestine, will become heroes. They're heroes already to us. We know who they are. We know that they're the heroes. We know that they're standing for justice and standing for what's right. But this government will wake up one day. Then they'll realize that they're heroes. Unfortunately, there are many other examples of U.S. government support for oppressors and occupiers that exist or have existed throughout the world. The Middle East, of course, has the largest pool of these occupiers and dictators. And unfortunately, our government, in addition to supporting the Israeli occupation and aggression, continues to support the support militarily and financially the progressive and democratic country regimes such as Abdel Fattah Sisi's Egypt, very democratic, very good person to follow. Saudi Arabian democratic government, the Kuwaiti democratic government, or of course, let's not forget, the democratic government of the United Arab Emirates. We continue to support these people. These are the democratic governments that we support, unfortunately. Although it is the Palestinians who have been and continue to be occupied, besieged, and abused by Israeli forces, the Israeli and U.S. governments continue to label the Palestinians as the criminals, and of course, Israelis as the victims. They're the victims. I don't get it. I don't think I ever will. You can call me biased, call me whatever you want. I don't get how they're the victims. It's just something that's never entered my head. The problem is that those people who try to fight against this tide, if I can use that term, or this situation, find themselves either being targeted, arrested, sanctioned, murdered, and even in this country. I mean, look at what happened to the Holy Land 5, as Miko said recently, Rasmiya Auda. We know what happened to her, unfortunately. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give her freedom. In the Holy Land 5, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give them the freedom and the patience that they undoubtedly need. Please say Ameen. Those people what's interesting to me, and when I was kind of thinking about this, what's interesting to me is when I look at the people who fight with the Israeli occupation forces, that American people who fight with the Israeli occupation forces, I mean, we don't know, I don't think we understand how many American Jews who were involved in the assault on Gaza the past summer were American. And we're talking about a situation where 80% of the 2,000 people who were killed were civilians, including 500 children. Now, of those people massacring those 500 children and those civilians, there were American Jews. And has our government labeled them? Has our government said that's not allowed? Has our government stopped them at the airport and asked them a ridiculous amount of questions as they do some of us? Not at all. And I just find that very, very flabbergasting. And, it begs the question, why is it that Americans of Palestinian descent or people who support Palestinian cause, when they express their concern for this just cause, they're targeted by the local FBI or whatever, customs or ICE or whatever it is. But when militant Jews join the Israeli occupation forces and engage in horrific attacks against the people of Gaza or Palestine, or other war crimes like, the collective punishment that happens, they're exempt. They're exempt from the scrutiny. I just don't get that. I mean, we talk about hypocrisy. This is hypocrisy on the largest levels. Can you imagine if there was a Palestinian columnist, don't laugh here, at the New York Times, I know that'll never happen, a Palestinian columnist at the New York Times, but imagine if there were one, and that individual had a son or daughter who went out and fought within the Palestinian resistance movement, whether it be peaceful or an armed struggle. I don't make that distinction for the purposes of this example. Do you really think that those people, that those Palestinians who did that will be able to keep their jobs at the New York Times? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. However, the truth is that there have been a number of American Jews whose parents are columnists at the New York Times who have fought with the Israeli occupation forces. Any scrutiny there? Did they lose their jobs? Absolutely not. So again, we have an issue with the hypocrisy and the fact that Palestinians, when they speak about justice and speak about what's right, they suffer repercussions, whereas others don't. Obviously, the problem is not with the Palestinians. Obviously, the problem is not with the Palestinians. The problem isn't with the brave Jews who I'm honored to share a stage with, like Miko Peled. The problem lies with our foreign policy. The problem lies with our politicians, the policymakers in this country, the people who are working at the behest of the Israeli government, its lobbies, and they want to criminalize the support of the Palestinian people. So it's our responsibility, everybody in this room, it's our responsibility to make sure that those rights are not denied, that those whose worship of Israel takes precedent over the commitment to the U.S. Constitution be questioned. We shouldn't stand silent. You know, as the saying goes, silence is consent, right? We can't do that. Our advocacy for Palestinians cannot be denied. We must continue to be assertive and push to educate the public and even our politicians. We must be assertive in standing up to the hypocrisy of our government leaders, both Republicans and Democrats. We can continue to assist and advocate for the Palestinians morally and even financially, as long as we don't do so to organizations that are labeled by our government. Because now this is where we get into the issue of material support, and we have to ensure that whatever we do, we're not providing assistance to these so-called terrorist organizations. Now, what's very sad to me when we talk about terrorist organizations is that the State of Israel is not considered a terrorist organization with our government, but it truly is the largest terrorist of all, truly. I want to end by saying just a couple of optimistic things now that I've kind of was super pessimistic, at least seemingly super pessimistic. I do think that the tide is changing. I really do. And if I didn't think so, I wouldn't be here today. And I think that it's because of people like you. It's because of conventions like this, and I'm not just saying this as an AMP representative, I promise, but it's because of conventions like this. It's because of people like you. It's because of the steadfastness of our brothers and sisters in Palestine that I think that the tide is changing. And I think things will change. And I have a great deal of confidence that the decades of occupation, the decades of colonialism, oppression, racism, and the denial of an entire nation's basic human rights will come to an end. I do have that feeling. And that justice will prevail. Palestine will in fact be free. Make no doubt about it, Palestine will be free. And once that happens, and once Palestine is free, we will live in a world where Jews, where Christians, where Muslims will live in a nation as equals. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.